It was supposed to be a fun night. The beer flowed out of the taps. My friends and I cracked jokes and celebrated my upcoming wedding. Little did I know that the night that was supposed to be full of laughter would end up with me dead on the sidewalk. Howdy, folks. Welcome back to another episode of Connor's Crime Podcast, the podcast where we dive into and explore various case studies that sit at the intersection of media, power, and difference. As always, I'm your lovely host, Connor Fecht. Before we begin the episode, I would like to say something personally. This case study has stuck with me for a long time now, not only because of the brutality of the crime, but also because of how preventable it really was. This case study goes to show how quickly fear, frustration, and bias can go into an uncontrolled spiral to violence. Moreover, when you look deeper into where this happened and what the city was going through at this time, the case study becomes even more tragic. Because to really understand the murder of Vincent Chin, you have to understand the environment of Detroit, Michigan in the early 1980s. The city was in an economic decline. Auto plants were closing, sending thousands of people out of work and heightening tensions. Japanese car companies were to blame for the layoffs, even though the real reasons were way more complex. As anger grew, Asian Americans, regardless of their nationality, became targets for their resentment. This was a moment in history where economic instability collided with racial stereotypes, causing a hazardous atmosphere. The episode today is a tough one to listen to, so take a seat, buckle up, and enjoy the show. Warning: this episode discusses the murder of Vincent Chin, including graphic violence, racism, and hate crimes. These topics may be distressing for some listeners. Please be advised. The episode's title is Mistaken for the Enemy: The Murder of Vincent Chin. Vincent Chin was misidentified and brutally murdered just days before his wedding. What was supposed to be a fun night out with his friends ended in violence. This story is full of twists and turns, and most prominently sorrow, that we will go through together for him and his family. I will split this series into two parts. This episode will go into depth on what happened on the night of June 19th, 1982, and the broader picture of the situation. The next episode will go into great depth about the ripples, changes, and large-scale impact that Chin's death has had over time. Now let me set the frame of this murder by providing a little background on Chin. According to the article, How the 1982 Murder of Vincent Chin Ignited a Push for Asian American Rights by Becky Little. Quote, Chin was born in China's Guangdong province and grew up in Detroit with his adoptive Chinese American parents. By the summer of 1982, he was 27, working in computer graphics, and his hometown, once known as an automotive manufacturing capital, was in decline. Many U.S. auto workers blame this decline on Japanese car manufacturers. End quote. An important detail to note here is that Chin was not even of the same nationality as those who were wrongfully blamed for Detroit's decline. In an article about Vincent Chin from the National Park Service, they give a quote about the circumstances that Chin had faced. Quote, on June 19th, 1982, Vincent Chin was hosting his bachelor party at the Fancy Pants Club in Highland Park, Michigan, with a few of his friends. Two white auto workers, Ronald Ebbins and his stepson, Michael Nitz, entered the bar and began to target Chin because of his Asian heritage. Ebbins was a foreman at the local Chrysler plant. Nitz had recently been laid off from the plant and was working at a furniture store. They called Chin racial slurs, swore at him, and accused him and other Asian Americans of taking jobs from white auto workers. When Chin stood up to confront them, a fight broke out. Both groups were thrown out of the bar. When Ebbins went to his car for a baseball bat, Chin ran. Ebbins and Nitz chased him but were unable to keep up. They returned to the parking lot where Chin's friends were still standing. They started to pursue Chin's Chinese-Canadian friend Jimmy, but ignored the white members of the group. Unable to catch either Chin or his friend on foot, Evans and Nitz continued their pursuit by car for the next half hour. A local man testified that they had offered him $20 to help get the Chinese. Evans and Nitz eventually identified Chin and his friend outside a McDonald's on Woodward Avenue. Nitz grabbed Chin from behind so that Evans could beat Chin's arms, legs, and body with the baseball bat. Evans finally delivered crushing blows to Chin's skull. There were several witnesses to the attack, including 2 off-duty police officers who ordered Evans to stop at gunpoint. Vincent Chin was rushed to Henry Ford Hospital. Surgeons operated on his head overnight before placing him on life support. After 4 days, Chin's mother and fiancé agreed to take Chin off life support. He died on June 23, 1982. He was 27. His 400 wedding guests attended his funeral. He was interred in Detroit's Forest Lawn Cemetery. End quote. I do not believe that I could have explained these events better than the authors of this article. It was a lot to take in. A portion of this quote that really stood out to me is that Chin's wedding guests all attended his funeral instead of their original plans. This is just heart-wrenching. The fact that these guests were in town for what was supposed to be Chin's happiest day and were met with the sorrow of the unfortunate news of his death was very moving. Unfortunately, the results for the murders were less than ideal. The murders of Chin were let off with merely a slap of the hand. According to the article, Who is Vincent Chin? The History and Relevance of a 1982 Killing by Francis Kai Kwa Wong, quote, Evans and Nitz were convicted of manslaughter. The two were sentenced by Judge Charles Kaufman to 3 years probation and ordered to pay a $3,000 fine. 2 civil rights trials and a civil lawsuit followed, but neither Evans nor Nitz spent a day in jail, end quote. This makes me very angry that these men who would do such horrible acts get away with such a measly fine. Furthermore, the news of the murder was not well covered and was released days after the murder happened because of the racial bias of the attackers. This murder caused outrage in the civil rights movement for the Asian Americans. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Connor's Crime Podcast. I hope I catch you next week to catch the impact and changes this case had on Asian American civil rights. Thank you.